At 6:47 a.m. on December 7th, 1287, a shepherd named Wojciech Kamiński stood on a ridge overlooking the eastern approaches to Lublin. He counted the columns of horsemen crossing the frozen Dnieper River below him. He stopped counting at 3,000. There were still more coming. The breath that escaped his lips turned to ice crystals before it reached the ground. By the time the sun had fully risen, Wojciech was dead. He had tried to run. No one outruns a Mongol arrow. But his death served a purpose. The warning fires he lit before the horsemen reached him were spotted by the garrison at Lublin. Those fires were relayed westward. Within 18 hours, Duke Leszek II the Black knew exactly what was coming. The Mongol Empire had returned to collect its due. To understand why every church bell in Lesser Poland began ringing on December 8th, you must first understand what the Mongols had already taken. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button as we share this history together. In 1241, the Mongol war machine had crossed into Poland like a blade through silk. The Battle of Legnica on April 9th of that year became a synonym for catastrophe. Duke Henry II the Pious assembled everything Poland had: Silesian knights in gleaming armor, Templar warriors blessed by Rome itself, infantry levied from a dozen duchies. Wasn't enough. Wasn't close to enough. The Mongols used smoke screens to blind the Polish cavalry. They shouted commands in Polish, "Flee! Flee!" through the chaos to sow confusion. They executed feigned retreats that lured the knights into kill zones. Duke Henry died on that field. His body was so mutilated that his widow, Anna, could only identify the corpse by counting his toes. He had 6 on his left foot. The Mongols paraded his head on a spear before the walls of Legnica to break the spirit of the survivors. The city of Kraków, the jewel of Polish civilization, the seat of learning and commerce, burned to the ground, not partially. Completely, the Mongols left nothing but ash and the smell of cooked flesh. In 1259, they returned. The pattern repeated. Sandomierz fell. Kraków burned again. Lublin, Zawichost, Beach, all sacked within weeks. An entire generation of Poles grew up understanding one truth. When the Mongols come, you pray. You run, you die. Those were the only options. So when the warning fires flickered on the eastern horizon in December 1287, the terror was not abstract. It was inherited, lived in the bones. But something had changed in those 46 years. Something the Mongols had not accounted for. Duke Leszek II the Black stood on the southern rampart of Krakow's new castle at 11:2002 a.m. on December 9th, 1287. He was 51 years old. His hair had gone grey at the temples from decades of political maneuvering. His eyes, according to the chronicler Jan Długosz, remained cold as river stones. Leszek possessed a quality that most military commanders lack: patience. He understood a psychological principle that modern strategists call defensive asymmetry, the idea that an attacker must expend far more resources to take a fortified position than a defender must expend to hold it. The Mongols needed quick victories. Their entire operational doctrine depended on speed, terror, and momentum. A siege that lasted weeks, instead of days, bled them dry. It exposed their supply lines, gave their enemies time to coordinate. Leszek's strategy was brutally simple.
Hold the line!
Do not give them
pursue.
the battle they want. He issued orders that must have felt like cowardice to the younger nobles. Do not engage in the open field. Do not pursue. Do not take the bait. Hold the fortresses. Let them come to you. This is where 46 years of preparation revealed itself. After the catastrophe of 1241, Polish rulers had faced an agonizing truth. Their defenses were obsolete. Wooden palisades that had protected Slavic settlements for centuries were useless against Mongol siege tactics. The conquerors had engineers from China. They had catapults. They had incendiary weapons. Poland rebuilt, not in wood. Stone. Krakow's old wooden citadel was demolished and replaced with a castle constructed entirely of dressed granite blocks. The walls were 14 feet thick at the base. The towers were positioned to provide overlapping fields of crossbow fire. Heavy catapults were mounted on the battlements, capable of launching 40-pound stones over 200 yards. Sandomierz received similar treatment. So did the monastery fortress at Święty Krzyż. Across Lesser Poland, the landscape transformed from soft wooden targets into a network of stone teeth. The Mongols were riding into a country that had spent 2 generations preparing specifically for their return. The invasion force numbered approximately 30,000 warriors, divided into 2 columns. Talabuga Khan led 20,000 troops, including Ruthenian vassals, towards Sandomir and the northern territories. Nogai Khan commanded 10,000 elite Mongol and Turkic cavalry toward Kraków. The plan was standard Mongol doctrine: split the enemy's attention, prevent unified resistance, plunder rapidly, and withdraw before winter supply problems became critical. At 4:15 p.m. on December 12th, Talabuga's vanguard reached the walls of Sandomierz. What happened next broke 40 years of Mongol expectations. The assault began at dawn on December 13th. Mongol horse archers circled the walls, loosing volleys meant to suppress the defenders. The arrows struck stone. They shattered. The crossbowmen on the battlements didn't even need to duck. Scaling parties approached with ladders. The catapults on the walls responded. Horses screamed. Men died in clusters. By 2:30 p.m., Talabuga ordered a withdrawal to reassess. The city that had fallen in hours in 1259 had not yielded a single inch. The walls held. The gates held. The garrison, disciplined, well supplied, protected by stone, simply waited. This was the first fracture in the Mongol plan. Talabuga, pragmatic despite his frustration, decided to bypass Sandomierz and raid softer targets in the Świętokrzyski mountains. His column moved northwest, seeking the wealthy abbey at Święty Krzyż. What he did not know was that Duke Leszek had been tracking his movements through a network of local scouts. The Duke had positioned his main field army, approximately 15,000 troops, to intercept once the Mongols were committed to difficult terrain. At 9:15 a.m. on December 20th, near the village of Lago, the two forces collided. The terrain favored the
Transcription!
The valleys channeled Mongol cavalry
pursue.
into narrow fronts where their numerical advantage meant nothing. The forests provided cover for Polish crossbowmen who could fire and relocate before the horse archers could respond. Leszek had studied the Battle of Legnica his entire life. He knew the feigned retreat. He knew the encirclement tactic. He ordered his commanders to hold formation under any circumstances. No pursuit, no breaking ranks. Let the Mongols exhaust themselves against the wall. The battle lasted 6 hours. By 3:22 p.m., Talabuga's forces had suffered what the Malopolska Chronicle described as grievous losses. The Mongol column broke, not in an orderly retreat, in a scramble eastward toward Kielce, abandoning their wounded. For the first time in Polish-Mongol history, it was the invaders who fled. 500 kilometers to the south, Nogai Khan arrived outside Kraków on Christmas Eve. He commanded 10,000 of the finest cavalry the Golden Horde possessed. He expected a quick victory to salvage the campaign's reputation after the failure at Sandomierz. At 7 a.m. on December 25th, his forces surrounded the city. The assault that followed was the most sustained effort the Mongols had made against a Polish fortification. Wave after wave of horse archers swept toward the walls. Siege engines were dragged into position. Assault parties with scaling ladders charged the gates. The walls did not break. Crossbow bolts from the towers reached the Mongol lines before their arrows could effectively strike the defenders. The catapults on the battlements launched stones that shattered siege equipment and scattered formations. By January 3rd, 1288, Nogai faced a calculation that Mongol commanders rarely had to make. His supplies were diminishing. His casualties were mounting. Contemporary sources suggest the Mongols lost several commanders in the failed assaults. The siege was bleeding him. He did something unprecedented. He abandoned the siege of Kraków and divided his remaining forces into raiding parties to salvage whatever plunder they could gather. This was a catastrophic, strategic error. While Nogai's army fragmented, Duke Leszek was not idle. Messengers had reached Hungary calling for Allied support. Voivode Georgi Baksa responded, bringing experienced Hungarian cavalry north across the Carpathians. In early January 1288, a Mongol raiding force of approximately 1,000 warriors besieged the town of Stary Sach in southern Poland. They believed they were isolated. They believed no significant enemy forces were nearby. They were wrong. At 6:30 a.m. on an unrecorded date in mid-January, the combined Polish-Hungarian army fell upon the Mongol detachment with total surprise. There was no battle. There was an extermination. The entire Mongol force was annihilated. Their commander died. Contemporary sources explicitly state that the enemy was completely destroyed. When word of Stary Sach reached Nogai, the mathematics of the campaign became undeniable. Talabuga had been defeated and was retreating. His own siege had failed. His raiding parties were being hunted. A hostile army was now operating freely behind his lines. By late January 1288, both Mongol columns had withdrawn from Polish territory. Here is what the Mongol sources do not say. The Golden Horde documented its conquests extensively. Victories were celebrated. Generals were praised. Plunder was catalogued with bureaucratic precision. The 1287-1288 Polish campaign exists as a void. The failure too embarrassing to record, an invasion that returned with nothing but casualties and shame. This silence tells us more than any chronicle could. After Stary Saks, the Mongols never invaded Poland again. Not once, for a century, they had treated Polish territory as easy plunder. After 1288, that equation changed permanently. The cost-benefit analysis had inverted. Stone walls made sieges expensive. Disciplined defenders made battles costly. Allied responses made raiding dangerous. Poland was no longer worth the blood. In Kraków today, every year on the first Thursday after Corpus Christi, a celebration called the Laconic Parade fills the streets. A performer dressed in elaborate Mongol-style costume rides through the city, and citizens playfully pay tribute by offering coins. The tradition commemorates the victory of 1288, possibly honoring the legendary raftsmen who allegedly raided the Mongol camp outside the city walls. 700 years later, they are still laughing at the Mongols who couldn't take Kraków. So let me answer the question that this entire story has been building toward. How did Poland stop what everyone believed was unstoppable? They did not develop superior weapons. They did not field a larger army. They did not discover some secret tactical innovation that the Mongols couldn't counter. They learned. That was the entire difference. Every wooden wall that burned in 1241 became a lesson. Every knight who died chasing a feigned retreat became a warning. Every city that fell because it stood alone became an argument for alliance. Poland took its trauma and converted it into infrastructure. It took its grief and forged it into stone. The Mongols expected 1241 to repeat. They expected terror to paralyze. They expected easy prey. What they found was a nation that had spent 46 years preparing specifically to kill them. Leszek II the Black died in 1288, the same year of his greatest triumph. He never saw the long-term consequences of his victory. The reunification of Poland under Ladislaw I in 1320, the cultural renaissance that followed, the transformation of Polish identity from victims to survivors. But he knew what he had done. He had proven that the apocalypse could be stopped. Not by prayers, not by miracles, by preparation, patience, and the refusal to make the same mistake twice. The Mongol Empire conquered everything from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Vienna. They crushed dynasties, they erased civilizations. They were, for a century, the closest thing to an unstoppable force that human history had produced. Poland stopped them, not with strength, with memory, and that, perhaps, is the most dangerous weapon any nation can possess. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, subscribe to the Narrate Hist Arena for more deep explorations of the battles that shaped our world. Drop a comment below. What other examples in history can you think of where a nation transformed its greatest defeat into its defining victory. This is the Narrate Hist Arena. History remembers those who refuse to fall twice.